Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into something really fascinating and, frankly, a bit of a fierce proxy war that's reshaping medicine right now. You see, the huge demand for GLP-1 drugs, Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, Mounjaro, it's really ignited this massive battleground.
It really has. And our mission today, essentially, is to unpack this incredibly complex landscape. You've got compounding pharmacies directly challenging Big Pharma's, well, long-held dominance. We're going to explore that tension, between access, affordability, and regulatory oversight. We'll dive into the surprising facts, the legal fights, and what it all means for you, the patient, the consumer.
And this isn't some quiet fight happening off stage, right?
Yeah.
This proxy war has had some very public moments, things people might have actually seen.
Yeah.
What were some of those moments that really brought this whole thing out into the open?
Well, a big one was back in 2024. Novo Nordisk publicly called out Hims and Hers for offering compounded GLP-1s. That felt like a real line in the sand. Then, fast forward to 2025, Hims and Hers went even bigger. They ran a national ad during the Super Bowl for compounded GLP-1s. That ad apparently drove a massive 650% spike in traffic for them. Just huge.
Wow, that's audacious.
Yeah.
And it wasn't only Hims and Hers, right? I remember Blue Chew, another telehealth company, they sponsored the Super Bowl the year before, in 2024. So these weren't exactly subtle moves. It really signaled that these compounder-powered direct-to-consumer platforms were stepping out of the shadows, right into the mainstream spotlight.
It's a huge shift, yeah. And it forces this critical question, doesn't it? What happens when the demand for affordable, personalized medicine just runs way ahead of the system designed to regulate it?
Okay, before we get deeper into the battle itself, maybe we should clarify who these players are. For anyone listening who isn't sure, what exactly is a compounding pharmacy?
Right, good point. So at its core, compounding means custom-making medications, tailoring them to a specific patient's needs. Think of it like a bespoke tailor, but for drugs. They can create different doses, maybe remove an allergen someone reacts to, or combine drugs that you can't buy off the shelf together. It's all about personalizing it for that one patient.
Okay, so it's not just adjusting doses. It sounds like there's a spectrum here. Are there different kinds of these pharmacies?
There are, yeah. We mostly talk about two main types. First, you have 503A pharmacies. They compound based on individual prescriptions from a doctor. Basically, one prescription, one custom medication at a time. Then you have 503B outsourcing facilities. Now, these guys can compound in bulk, often supplying hospitals or clinics, and they operate under much stricter FDA oversight, almost like small-scale manufacturers.
Right.
Both types have seen demand just skyrocket lately, especially with all the drug shortages.
So it's not just some niche thing anymore. It sounds like compounding is becoming, well, almost a frontline solution to problems in the wider drug market. What are some of those failures it's addressing?
Exactly. It's stepping into the gaps where the industrial model, kind of falls short. We're talking about incredibly expensive brand name drugs, for one. Then there are the chronic shortages. We've seen that with so many medications, not just GLP-1s. Plus, you have rigid dose forms that just don't work for everyone, and this sort of one-size-fits-all approach from Big Pharma. Compounding offers a way around those limitations.
And while GLP-1s are grabbing all the headlines, compounding is making waves elsewhere too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where else is this model having an impact?
Oh, absolutely. It's huge in dermatology platforms like Muesli, for example, offering customized skin treatments. We're also seeing it playing a really key role in hormone replacement therapy, HRT, companies like MIDI Health. And in thyroid care, Paloma Health is another name. Beyond that, it's big in pain management, veterinary medicine, even eye drops, ophthalmic treatments. Often it involves these low-cost combo topicals or really precise dosing or non-standard formats that Big Pharma just doesn't focus on.
Okay, so on one side, you've got this amazing flexibility, this potential for lower costs. But the flip side, that core tension you mentioned, is access versus oversight. What are the potential risks? The red flags people raise about quality and regulation?
Yeah, and this is where it gets tricky, and it's really important for anyone considering these options. While compounding offers flexibility and affordability, there are real oversight challenges. Red flags include things like salt form confusion. That's where a compounder might use a slightly different chemical form, a salt form of the active ingredient. That could potentially lead to different effects, maybe lower effectiveness or just unpredictability for the patient. There are also concerns sometimes about where they source the ingredients and inconsistent quality control. especially when some operations seem to be producing large amounts for telehealth platforms, maybe blurring the lines around those individual prescription roles.
Right, so it's not always straightforward. And a key part of this seems to be what Sean Noreen, he's the founder and CEO of Empower Pharmacy, calls the middleman problem. What's his take on this?
He puts it very bluntly, and it's a quote that really hits home, I think. He said, "The most expensive part of your medication isn't the drug, it's the middleman." He points to PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, wholesalers, insurance layers, saying they all touch the product but add zero clinical value, and patients are the ones who pay for it. Way. He also mentioned something like, most people think compounded meds are fringe. The truth, they're often the only personalized option, but the system treats compounding like a loophole instead of a lifeline. It's a pretty powerful critique of the whole drug distribution chain.
That really lays bare the systemic issues, doesn't it? And this affordability piece, it's not just about saving a few bucks. Jeff Cook, the Sound founder, suggests it's a genuine public health issue. He even proposed something called a high-priced drug list. What's the idea there?
Yeah, his proposal is pretty interesting. Basically, if a brand name drug's price in the US is way out of line with global prices, compounders should be explicitly allowed to step in and provide an alternative. He cites data showing that 2 out of 3 people, about 66%, would prefer a compounded option if the brand name is just too expensive. And I mean, just look at the GLP-1s again for context. Roughly $1,000 a month here versus maybe $100 elsewhere. That's a tenfold difference. It makes affordability a massive hurdle.
Okay, so compounders are pushing for access, highlighting affordability. But Big Pharma, with all its resources, isn't just sitting back and watching this happen. What have their counter moves looked like? Have things gotten legally messy?
Oh, definitely. Things have heated up. A big regulatory shift happened in early 2025. The FDA announced that the shortages of semaglutide and tirzepatide were officially resolved. Now, this was key because it effectively ended the emergency permissions that allowed broader compounding April 22nd for 503As, May 22nd for the 503Bs. The FDA also specifically flagged dosing errors, especially with multi-dose vials from compounders calling for tighter oversight. It felt like a clear move to rein in the compounders.
So trying to shut down a major pathway for them, and beyond regulation, narrative control seems to be a big part of Big Pharma's playbook here. How does that unfold?
Exactly. Starting around 2024, you suddenly saw this wave of stories about fake Ozempic and the dangers of compounded GLP-1s hitting major news outlets, CNN, the New York Times, places like that. What's really crucial for listeners to grasp is that these reports often didn't clearly distinguish between, say, genuinely illegal, unregulated imports and licensed 503A or 503B compounders working within the rules.
Yeah.
There's evidence that industry-backed groups were feeding data and quotes that help blur those lines, basically painting all compounding with the same risky brush in the public eye.
A classic PR strategy shaping the story. And they didn't just focus on the media, did they? They also went after state-level regulations.
They did. Since the FDA didn't issue an outright ban on compounded GLP-1s, these trade groups shifted focus to state pharmacy boards and regulators. They started circulating model legislation, legal memos, pushing for restrictions that would essentially force compounders to stick rigidly to FDA-approved labeling, which kind of defeats the purpose of personalization. And we saw some state boards adopt language almost identical to these proposals, making it tougher for compounders to operate, especially across state lines.
Okay, so regulation, media. But there's also a direct legal assault happening, right? The patent battle.
Yeah.
That sounds like taking the fight directly to Big Pharma's core strength.
It's a very direct, very bold move, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Empower Pharmacy has actually petitioned the U.S. Patent Trial and Appeal Board. They want to invalidate Eli Lilly's patent for tirzepatide, that's the drug in Mounjaro and Zepbound. Empower's argument is based on prior art, essentially saying the core invention wasn't actually new, the science was already out there. If they succeed, well, that could seriously weaken Lilly's monopoly and potentially open the door for much wider compounding of tirzepatide. Even without official shortages, it really could be a game changer.
And looking broadly at how industries are regulated, it feels like there's some, well, pretty stark double standards sometimes, especially when you compare Big Pharma to, say, Big Tech, which seems to face constant antitrust heat.
That's a really sharp comparison because you're right. Big tech is often under the microscope for antitrust issues, while Big Pharma seems to operate with much greater protection, much longer exclusivity. You have things like the Hatch-Waxman Act, which was meant to help generic drugs enter the market, but now it's often used for what they call evergreening. That means making small tweaks to get new patents and extend monopolies for years, even decades. Think about this. Top-selling drugs in the U.S. average over 70 patents each, and they can get up to 40 years of market exclusivity. Compare that to top tech firms, they average maybe 38 patents, 20 years of product protection. It's a massive difference. Even the FTC has called out these pharma tactics as potentially abusive.
Wow. Okay, so given all this, the good, the bad, the messy, what does responsible compounding actually look like? And what's the bigger vision here for personalized medicine?
Well, it's not all just, regulatory gray areas. We are seeing models of responsible compounding emerge. Some of the larger 503B facilities, for instance, are partnering directly with health systems. They're operating with more transparency, better traceability of ingredients, and really close collaboration with physicians. These kinds of hybrid models, where compounding fills specific gaps within the established healthcare system, could point towards a viable path forward.
And Sean Norian, back at Empower Pharmacy, he seems to have a pretty clear, almost disruptive vision for this, doesn't he?
He really does. He puts it very directly. Personalized medicine isn't the future. It's already here. He talks about building Empower specifically to bypass the noise. His focus, he says, is on getting quality, affordable medicine into patients' hands without friction, markup, or delay. It goes beyond just his company. It reflects this broader shift in what people are starting to expect from healthcare.
Which really suggests that this whole rise of compounding, it isn't just some random fluke or a simple workaround. It feels more like a referendum on a broken model, maybe.
I think that's exactly right. It's a clear signal that people are rejecting a system that prices them out of necessary treatments and, you could argue, stifles real innovation through lack of competition. Patients aren't just looking for a slightly cheaper pill. They seem to be pushing back against what they perceive as, you know, big pharma monopolies, these opaque middlemen adding cost but no value, and regulations that feel outdated. They want a healthcare system that actually reflects the complexity of their individual needs, not just the rigidity of an old industrial model based on mass production along monopolies.
And we are seeing concrete signs that the ground is shifting, aren't we? New players, new money coming in.
Absolutely. You've got big tech giants like Amazon pushing deeper into healthcare, clearly seeing an opportunity here. And there's a noticeable increase in venture capital, private equity money flowing into telehealth platforms, many of which are either acquiring or partnering strategically with compounding pharmacies. The old power structures are definitely being challenged. The dynamics are changing.
So wrapping up our deep dive today, it feels like the key takeaway is that compounding isn't just some minor loophole. It's more like a flashing warning light for a system under serious strain. It really highlights that when essential medicines are priced like absolute luxuries and guarded like fortresses, well, people will find another way in.
Right. Compounders didn't necessarily create the problems, but they certainly exposed the cracks in the system, didn't they? And maybe offered a glimpse of a more flexible, more patient-centered future for medicine.
Which leaves us with maybe this final thought to chew on. If we as a society are willing to heavily regulate things like digital app stores to ensure competition and fair access, why aren't we applying the same scrutiny to monopolies that control access to potentially life-saving drugs? This whole situation really makes you question whether the system compounding challenges was ever truly as safe or equitable as we assumed. And it makes you wonder what other changes are coming down the pike as these new forces continue to shake things up.